Have you ever wondered why NG911 seems to be taking longer than waiting at the DMV on a Friday afternoon? Strap in, because today we're breaking down Next-Gen 911 migration in terms everyone can understand, even if the tech is still bafflingly complex. That's coming up next on TiPS Today in Public Safety.
Welcome to TiPS Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Here's your host, Fletch, with today's tips.
Welcome to TiPS Today in Public Safety. This is Fletch. I'm an ENP and the Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. 3 times a week, I bring you the latest, most informative, and sometimes controversial takes on emergency communications. Today, we're taking a plunge into next-generation 911 migrations, and while it feels like the never-ending upgrade. All right, friends, let's talk about next-generation 911. Now, NG911 is not just any upgrade. It's a complete technological overhaul that's been simmering for over 25 years, evolving from a simple what if into a full-blown public safety revolution. Picture it like replacing your ancient rotary dial phone with the latest smartphone, except you have no idea how to use apps, touchscreens, or even what the hell an emoji is. That's right, the NG911 upgrade was, and still is, a monster. When Next Generation 911 was conceived, it was built from scratch using technologies that most folks hadn't even heard of yet. You remember the early 2000s? We were still impressed when a cell phone could flip open dramatically. SIP telephony? Back then, people thought it was about drinking your coffee politely. But today, it's the backbone of emergency communication. For all the techie geeks out there, SIP was built on something called IMS, the Internet Multimedia Subsystem, which sounds fancy because it actually is. Next Generation 911 introduced functional elements, like the Emergency Services Routing Proxy, or ESRP. What's that do? Exactly what it says. It routes emergency calls. Genius naming conventions, but back then, even I was scratching my head like a kid in calculus class. So being a telephony guy and fairly new to data, how did I finally make sense of this alphabet soup that's out there? Easy. And it's the same advice that I give when taking the ENP exam. Draw a diagram. You laugh, but it works. Once I laid out each part, every line and arrow, it suddenly clicked. Like assembling IKEA furniture and finally realizing that those extra leftover screws are intentional. Okay, maybe that doesn't inspire confidence, but you get the point. But let's get real. Why does this migration take longer than the last 2 minutes of the Super Bowl? It's because Next Generation 911 exists in 3 distinct silos. The originating network, think your cell phone or an enterprise network, the carrier network in the middle, or the delivery mechanism, and then the 911 public safety network, the heroes behind the headsets. Each individual silo has to independently upgrade before Next Generation 911 fully clicks into place. Think about your TV setup. You have a fancy high-definition camera capturing color footage. Then you have a TV station broadcasting in glorious HD. And then your stunning 90-inch television sitting in your den receiving the picture. If any one component slips to black and white analog, your fancy home theater experience reverts to something your grandparents watched on date night. Well, that's exactly what's happening in Next Generation 911. Every part needs to be upgraded. And until they all sync, we're stuck watching the public safety equivalent of reruns in monochrome. So here's where the confusion hits harder than autocorrect during a text message argument. When news breaks about a Next Generation 911 upgrade, folks assume the entire system is HD ready, when in reality, it's usually just one silo. Now, while public education seems logical, honestly, no one outside the tech circle cares enough to digest that complexity. Trust me, when I've tried, I've seen eyes glaze over quicker than donuts at a dispatch center. Instead, our industry professionals need a simplified explanation ready for curious but casual observers. The next time somebody asks, just say, look, it's like upgrading a car, part by part. You're not going to get a Tesla performance until all the components match up. Simple. right? But the reality check is NENA, the National Emergency Number Association, is on the right track. Standards are iterative, evolving with lessons learned along the way. The critical part is moving in a coordinated, standards-based direction that ensures compatibility and efficiency. And by the way, what standard was going to be used was a significant delay in the initial years, with different organizations battling for superiority. But that book has been closed for decades. One thing's certain though, whether you're upgrading the enterprise side, building a carrier network, or installing call handling equipment at the local ECC, every step taken today shapes the future. So keep calm and carry on, upgrading one silo at a time. That's it for today's episode of TiPS, Today in Public Safety. Thanks so much for listening. For more updates and insights, remember to follow me on most social media platforms at Fletch911, and you can visit 911tips.com for a complete archive of all of our previous episodes. Stay safe. Thanks so much for listening. And if you're in public safety, thanks for what you do every day. Take care. I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Hosted by Fletch and available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Catch past episodes on 911tips.com. That's 911tips.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to join us each week for the latest on NG911. I am Spider Harrison, the official 911 voiceover dude. Catch me on Sirius XM on various channels, including 90s on 9, the 10 spot, and on the Weekend Countdown on Hits 1. Or don't regret it for the rest of your life. Either way, I'm good. TiPS is brought to you by 911 Inform, the leading next-generation 911 solution for enterprise compliance with federal 911 regulations. Visit them on the web at 911inform.com. 911 Inform, making every second count when it matters the most.